Hi, my name is Max Millett. This video is for the Aircraft Systems for Pilots class with Mr. Pullman online. I'm going to be talking about the fuel system in the Citabria today. We've got 9.3 here. There's not a lot of people flying today since it's IMC outside, and this is a good opportunity to start shooting this video. So I have a reference of the fuel system that I drew out here on this piece of notebook paper that I'm going to go by to help explain the fuel system. And we're going to start right here in these fuel tanks with the filler caps on top of the wing in the Citabria. I'm going to go over here on the left-hand tank. We have these non-vented filler caps on top of the wings that we use to put fuel directly into the tanks. They're non-vented, so that means that we have to have a vent to allow air to come in and displace the fuel as it gets sucked out of the tanks. So we have this little inlet right here for air to flow in and a little bug blocker for it so it doesn't get clogged. If that were to get clogged or stopped up somehow, there would probably be a vacuum that occurred inside the tank, and if it got strong enough without air coming in to displace the fuel, it could completely hold the fuel back and stop it from getting to the engine altogether. And in that case, you would have fuel exhaustion. Those tanks hold 17.5 gallons of usable fuel each, giving the Citabria a total of 35 gallons of usable fuel, which is just under 5 hours of flight time, minus the reserve. And from the tanks, there is an orifice check valve in there, which regulates, it stops the fuel from venting overboard in the event of a negative G condition. Since these are aerobatic planes, especially 9.9 and 9.3, sometimes that can happen a lot. If you start pulling any negative Gs, and that stops fuel from being vented overboard. So, moving forward, the fuel will run down these prefabricated fuel lines into the aft and forward fuel manifold. We'll start over here at the aft manifold, sort of in the back of the fuselage over here, and it has the aft main ring coming off of it underneath. And this is one of the places that we sump and are able to get a good sample on pre-flight to check for any contaminants or moisture that's in the fuel. The forward manifold is actually sits sort of in the cockpit just behind the firewall, which separates the engine from the airframe. It sits underneath the engine panel in here. And we can see the forward fuel manifold in there with those 3 blue hinges coming off of it. These manifolds are going to separate the fuel-air mixture, and they're going to help basically regulate the ratio of fuel and air that goes to the cylinders. From this forward fuel manifold, you can see on this diagram here, the fuel will go directly to the primer, partly, which sits right here. That's how the pilot actuates it. And this squirts fuel directly into the engine for a cold start, basically. If the engine's cold and hasn't been ran for a while, we can give it a couple primes, shoot fuel directly into the carburetor and into the cylinders, sorry. Goes directly to the cylinders and helps start the engine more smoothly if it's cold out. From the forward manifold, we also have this fuel shutoff valve right here that you can operate just by pulling out like this, and that stops any fuel flowing past the firewall. Basically, if there's an engine fire or anything like that, a fuel fire, that's a good idea to stop any fuel going to the engine so that the engine doesn't have anything to burn or combust anymore. After the fuel shutoff valve, that fuel will come down here to the gasculator, which sits right over here in the engine. I'm not going to take the whole cowling off for this, but this is the drain that comes down off of it, and it's another place that we sump on pre-flight to check for any contaminants, and the gasculator will actually filter any contaminants out before the fuel goes to the carburetor. The carburetor sits inside this cowling again and connects directly to the throttle and mixture, and that controls the amount of fuel and air that are going into the engine. It also controls the speed of the engine. And we can help control that too by using the throttle, which opens and closes the throttle body on the carburetor, and the mixture, which we can make more rich, adding more fuel to the carburetor, or lean it out by pulling this out and adding less fuel and more air to the carburetor. Another feature the Citabria has this carb heat. It's an anti-icing system. In case the carburetor starts to pick up any ice in flight, we can pull the carb heat and send hot air directly into the carburetor. That'll help melt any ice that's in there, but it will decrease the engine performance, usually by about 100 RPM for just a few seconds, and then there would be a slow rise in RPM as the ice starts to melt. So that's just a preventative feature. It's also on the descent and before landing checklist, just to make sure there's no ice that got in there. So overall, the fuel system on the Citabria is pretty simple, but it's also really essential for pilots to know. In my case, I have my private pilot check ride coming up in about a few weeks, really, so it's essential for me to know. Also, it's a good idea for any pilot to know the fuel system on his aircraft in the event of an engine fire, to know how much fuel to bring, obviously, and what to do, just to have a basic understanding of it in any emergency situation. So that's all I got. Thank you.